Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video we are looking at Meta. It is time for another update, and today we continue to track our internal third wave where we have been looking for a 1-2 setup within this area to be followed by a third wave. Now we are looking to build out of this an even larger wave tree to even higher targets. But before we get into all those details and the levels to watch for continued upside, I want to go quickly through the larger time frame for any of you who might be new. And here we have been tracking this idea of a 1-2 setup where now we are looking for a third wave to unfold to the upside. Now, of course, this wave tree does not need to form in a single direct line to the upside. We are of course looking for a potential initial wave 1. However, even within such an idea, we are still looking for this uptrend to continue for a little while longer, as within our preferred interpretation in this area, we have been tracking a series of 1-2 setups, where now we have been looking at this as a potential wave 3 top and a wave 4 correction that has managed to reach the area of support, where as long as we hold the 50% retracement at the $467 level, we can still track continuation to the upside within a fifth wave. Now, of course, within a correction, we expect normally to form a three-wave pattern. This has been successfully achieved. We expect to get into the area of support. We can also put a check mark on that, and we expect to create a nice initial 5-wave move to the upside. We can also add a small check mark for this idea because we had here a tiny 1-2 setup from a few videos ago already, and we have succeeded in following through in the next wave to the upside. Now, even though this is possibly the larger fifth wave unfolding, I cannot discard the idea of a possible extension internally, because even though I could see this as a 1, 2, 3rd, 4th, and the 5th, nothing is really stopping me from tracking an extension within this fifth wave. And that is exactly what we have been focusing on within the yellow interpretation, where we have the same wave 1, 2, 3, and 4, but within the fifth wave, we consider that this has only been the wave 1 to the upside. We have been tracking a wave 2 correction, still we expect a 3-wave pattern. We have retraced perfectly into the 61.8% retracement into our area of support. Yeah, perfect reaction here within this push. And we have started a nice reaction to the upside. Now, we are tracking pretty much the same patterns within both interpretations, within both ideas, but this expects to only have an extension of the previously mentioned wave 3. This would still track afterwards the same wave 4 and look for the larger fifth wave to the upside only once we have that complete. This is probably currently my preferred interpretation, and we have been following through within our expectations of this structure very nicely. Now, it is going to be quite difficult to actually determine which pattern is unfolding, but I believe we can track this idea where we would expect normally a more bullish structure, and I would be looking for a third wave to unfold. For this, I would be watching an ideal target for such a wave 3. We have already provided this, by the way, in the previous videos. Yeah, we provide them in almost every single video to keep everyone up to date, but we are looking here at around the $1,200 level at the 138.2% extension of the wave 1. Now, that is the ideal target for the wave 3. It doesn't mean that it cannot extend beyond that, but that is the minimum I would need to be able to reliably track a wave 4 correction and a fifth wave to still play out afterwards. Now, within this pattern, I have provided you this area of support for the larger wave 2 ever since we topped within the wave 1. We were looking for a 3-wave retracement into those levels before we would even assume a bottom to possibly be in place. We have reached those very nicely. We have even created an initial confirmation here in the smaller time frame by forming this initial 5-wave move to the upside, after which we had a 3-wave correction and continuation to the upside. This was going to be always the likely part of this structure, and we were tracking this as a potential 1-2 setup. We have once again reacted perfectly to the area of support from the 78.6% retracement at the $601. We have bounced into this massive push to the upside, and as I was saying, this was the likely part of this structure, not because the wave 3 was always going to unfold, but because we had an initial 5-wave move to the upside. We were looking for a 3-wave correction and then at the very least another 5-wave move to the upside, but this didn't need to be within a wave 3, and it still doesn't, which is why I want to highlight this area of resistance that goes all the way up to the $744 level, into which we have pushed perfectly and created a quite strong initial reaction. Now, this could still cause us to create a reset even of the larger wave 2, even a complete failure of this structure. But this was the likely part. now we are facing some more significant risk in creating a larger pattern to the upside, and we could be looking instead at something like a WXY pattern to take us to even lower prices. In this case, we would have an ABC pattern complete in this wave X perfectly into the last level of resistance where we wouldn't need to form additional highs. And that is why generally within the wave 3 you want to start taking some profits, yeah? Towards the end of such a pattern, you could be looking at a more significant top more often than you may realize. And even though we will have levels of support to continue to track this uptrend, the risk has significantly increased now that we have a full count within this structure. Now here, in the smaller time frame, we can identify clearly an impulse within this wave to the upside. I don't need any additional extensions to even consider this third wave complete, because the same way I provided you the ideal target for the larger wave 3, I can do the same for this internal structure, and it still remains here at the 138.2% extension of the wave 1, the $739 level. That has been reached beautifully. We can now assume that this third wave has formed a more significant top and that a larger correction in a wave 4 has begun, but I cannot guarantee you, and we will not have the same probabilities for this uptrend to continue, not the same way we had for this initial 1-2 setup. Now, of course, we are still looking for continuation higher, and in the yellow interpretation, I will assume that a top is in place for the wave 3, and I will be looking for the wave 4 correction into the area of support between the $707.3 all the way down to the $668 level. And normally, I would be looking for continuation to the upside within this idea of a fourth and a fifth against this 50% retracement. But on this chart, we actually have a small problem with this idea, because in an impulse, we are not allowed to have the wave 1 and the wave 4 overlap, meaning the wave 4 cannot go into the territory of the wave 1. The wave 1 has stopped at the $677 level. If we get into this territory within this correction in the wave 4, I will not be able to track this as an impulse anymore, and I will need to consider a different pattern completely. Now, until such is the case, I will continue to assume that this wave 4 correction can still occur and we can still look for a fifth wave to the upside. And once we actually have this fourth and the fifth complete, we will have once again the opportunity to look for an initial 5-wave move to the upside, a 3-wave correction where we would have a high probability area of support for continuation to higher prices. You see, we are not expecting to build even here the third wave in a direct fashion, yeah? Not this larger wave 3 that is expected to go to around the $1,200 level. We expect to form instead a wave 1, have a wave 2 correction, and then build the third wave to the upside. Doesn't need to unfold like this, because we could see this build in a more direct fashion. Yeah, this third wave doesn't need to even have a top. I am looking still for extensions. I will provide those areas of support in a moment. I just wanted to highlight the larger trend first. Now, if we enter this wave 1 territory, but we still don't break the area of support, I might still be able to track here an internal 1-2 setup, but below the 50% retracement, even though theoretically and technically a 1-2 setup could still work out. For me, I have noticed during the years that it usually doesn't, not after such a strong push to the upside. Yeah, we don't usually see a deep retracement and the pattern to still succeed in forming the next wave to the upside. Sometimes it does, but it usually doesn't pan out too well. And I will be inclined to believe that we would need a signal, another confirmation by forming from a smaller time frame an initial 5-wave move to the upside before we look for continuation and potentially for a position for this pattern to extend even higher. Now, as I was mentioning, it is possible for this third wave to extend, especially based on the strength that we have formed this push within, this supposed fifth wave. Yeah, we have here a 1, 2, 3, fourth, and a fifth. It doesn't need to be like that. It could be even a series of 1, 2 setups within this area, or yeah, this could be a third, fourth, and a fifth, and we could see this pattern create a larger wave 3, yeah, potentially building this entire movement in a much more direct fashion. I will not assume as of now how this pattern will unfold. I will instead be tracking the levels of support and the likely scenarios that we could be tracking within this area. So for this, I will consider an area of support for continuation to higher prices, once again for a correction within a wave 4, but now for an internal wave 4 within this area in something like a 1, 2, third, fourth, and a fifth. For this, we have the area of support extend all the way down to the $704 level, below the 50% retracement there. Once again, the likelihood of this pattern to extend will be extremely decreased. Fortunately, we do have some structural support around this area, near the $704 level specifically, and it may aid us in creating this uptrend continuation. For the sake of the larger time frame, I will assume a more substantial top is in place and consider the large wave 4 correction. I'm not personally necessarily looking for positions within this area. Yeah, we have had this much higher probability area of support for the 1-2 setup already where I've been interested. Now I'm either waiting for this to run out and push to the larger pattern to the upside, or form the larger 5-wave move to the upside for the next opportunity after the 3-wave correction. Now, in terms of additional structural support, you may want to also watch out here, specifically at around the $691 level. We have here these significant bottoms that have formed that I believe will be extremely useful should we get into them. But for now, there really isn't much else to add within this time frame. We could be looking, I suppose, within this internal structure, but even here, not much to add. I could assume this to be something like an A, B, C pattern to unfold, but I wouldn't even need to see additional extensions lower. This could be expected to form a wave 4 we have gotten in the case of the blue interpretation into the 38.2% retracement. I suppose we could add here a small count for the clarity of this pattern, but personally, I will be patiently watching the levels of support for continuation to higher prices. I am aware that we may be at a more significant top since we pushed here into the 78.6% retracement within a 3-wave pattern. So to do a recap and sum up the key points to remember from this video. We are watching for continuation higher in an extension against the $704 level. We are watching for continuation higher in a 5-wave move to the upside against the $677 level, yeah, the wave 1 top, since we cannot overlap, and theoretically we can allow a deeper retracement in the case of a 1-2 setup here, but I wouldn't necessarily trust this too much. Still, below the 50% retracement would be a strong warning for me. If we should expect this wave 4 correction in yellow to unfold, I would be looking at similar proportions with what we had within this wave 2 in yellow. And for now, these are the levels, this is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe and let me know what else you want me to cover, and I'll do my best to do that in the days and weeks ahead. And until then, I hope you have a nice day, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.